Before we made our way from the Great Smoky Mountains in Tennessee to the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, we had to confirm one thing. While our Nashville Airbnb host went about their day around the house as usual, we anxiously huddled in our bedroom and waited the results of our pregnancy test. Was Lissa just feeling sick in the Smokies, or was it something else? We took a peek at the test. We were very pregnant. This wasn't unwelcome news, but it also wasn't quite something we were expecting to hear 3 weeks into a 4-month road trip. Can you hike while pregnant? Would camping be safe? Was our trip even possible anymore? We phoned a friend, a new mom, to learn what her experience was like, and went into town to buy a book on pregnancy. The drive from Tennessee to Colorado is made up of long stretches of flat land. The sheer immenseness of the country served as a dramatic backdrop for thinking about our unexpected news and the journey ahead. Both in the next 4 months and for the rest of our lives. On the morning, we learned our baby was the size of a poppy seed. We sat staring at our morning bagel in disbelief, unsure if we could even continue the trip. We scheduled our first OB/GYN visit for Denver, Colorado, and decided to save any decision making until then. So for now, it was on with the project. As we drove into the gateway town of Estes Park, the view of the snow-capped Rocky Mountains told us we had arrived, and to our right, the herds of elk wandering the golf course reminded us we were in a wild place. Rocky Mountain National Park was established in 1915, 1 year before the National Park Service was created to manage the country's growing collection of public lands. In Estes Park, Enos Mills, mountain guide and a friend of John Muir, was the most visible feature of the National Park Monument. Here, hold my hand, honey.
Yeah,
You all right?
I'll say that.
Let's see. And he traveled to places like San Francisco, Kansas City, and Chicago to give lectures on the importance of preservation of the wild. Though Mills is often called as the father of Rocky Mountain National Park, many others also contributed to the effort. Isabella Bird, a British traveler, published letters from her visit to Estes Park over 30 years before the park was created. Letters that captured the imaginations of people across the world. There was also F.O. Stanley, inventor and a hotelier. The Stanley steamer, sweetheart. You know all about that. Whose Estes Park Hotel inspired Stephen King's novel The Shining, and groups like the Estes Park Women's Club and the Colorado Mountain Club, who raised funds and donated land to the park effort. Sorry, honey, that's all right. My ring. You squeezed too hard. Take it off there. Hold on to that bear. There you go.
Okay.
It's all right.
I'm weaker, fatty.
I love you, don't worry. Behind this park was with all our parks, was a community effort to preserve these lands forever. The Rockies were proposed as a wilderness area in the 1970s and designated as wilderness in 2009. It remains 95% wilderness today, home to elk moose, bighorn sheep, and a handful of black bears. As a wilderness, the construction of roads or other development is limited, making the park a haven for backcountry hikers, skiers, and mountain climbers looking for solitude. This designation also influences the management of the park. Moraine Park once hosted lodges and a golf course, but all were torn down to return the landscape to nature. Local historian Kurt Buchholz toured us around a number of historic sites. The Elkhorn Lodge that housed Colorado's first park ranger, the site of Lord Dunraven's very first tourist lodge, Enos Mills and Isabella Bird's cabins, all of which sit outside the park without fanfare. The emphasis of this park is not its human history, it's the wild. While a marmot in the alpine tundra certainly is eager to bark a story at you, it was the human stories we were interested in finding. From those ingredients to these lands to the stories of today, an important part of our process was to collect stories from the underrepresented people in each of the national parks we visited. And the Rocky Mountains challenged our persistence. Ute and Arapaho tribes, who were native to this region, were nomadic. They hunted in these mountains, but settled elsewhere to escape the harsh winters. There was little Ute or Arapaho presence in the nearby towns we visited, except for, on occasion, an occasional mention of the famous Arapaho pack trip of 1914, organized by Harriet Vale and Edna Hendry of the Colorado Mountain Club. They sought to strengthen the case for preservation to Congress by reviving traditional Arapaho place names. Ironically, it was the Ute tribes, not the Arapaho, that had a longer history in the land, but the Ute elders rejected the Colorado Mountain Club's invitation due to legends of tragedy at Grand Lake on the west side of the park, which left hundreds of women and children dead. Without a local organization that interprets the Ute or Arapaho history and culture, the native legacies of the Rocky Mountains remain difficult to access. European settlers faced difficulties soon after they arrived in the Rockies in the 1850s. Miners on the west side panned for gold, only to find that there was none. The short growing season of roughly 40 days resulted in the saying that all you can grow around here is radishes, pansies, and hell. The primary business of the early settlers soon turned to providing lodging for visitors who flocked to the Rockies each summer. Abner Sprague, one of the first settlers, said, "We came here for small ranch operations, but guests and visitors became so numerous, at first wanting eggs, milk, and other provisions, then wanting lodging, and finally demanding full accommodations, that we had to go into the hotel business or go bankrupt from keeping free company." At least until Memorial Day, when room rates quadrupled, we happily took up lodging in the Rockies, enjoying showers, washing machines, and nearby bathrooms. The other physical challenges of the Rockies made the comforts of a hotel all the more enticing. In these mountains, visitors are somewhere between 7,522 to 14,259 feet at the top of Long's Peak, above sea level. Thin mountain air becomes a shortness of breath for East Coasters like us, and altitude sickness is made worse during a first trimester pregnancy. Although we were there at the start of the summer, Our visit just coincided with the opening of Trail Bridge Road, setting the record for the highest continuous highway in the United States. Trail Ridge Road offers visitors access to the dramatic alpine tundra within the park, as well as the Alpine Visitor Center, the country's highest at 11,796 feet. When we arrived, it was just being dug out from a snow pile higher than the building itself, and the electricity had yet to be turned on. Long branches and poles, serving as guides for snowplows, flanked the roads at this elevation. You will find an unforgiving, yet fragile, landscape with thin soil, intense ultraviolet light, bitter cold, and unpredictable weather that can change suddenly. A sunny day gives way to a windy thunderstorm. A clear afternoon turns into a hazy mist. The Rockies are also home to the Continental Divide. Water that falls west of the divide flows to the Pacific Ocean, while water that falls east reaches the Atlantic. Strolling the river trail in Estes Park, we were in awe of the river's forceful and rapid flow, a visual reminder of snowmelt in the mountains. This snowmelt is an important source of water across all of the United States. For farmers in the lower plains, thousands of miles away, this water is vital, lifeline for their crops. Managing it is so important that it has become political. They say in the Rockies that whiskey's for drinking, but water's for fighting. In a doctor's office in Denver, our first appointment since our positive pregnancy test, we got our first glimpse of our little stowaway, a barely distinguishable speck with a glittering heartbeat. Amused by all of our questions, the doctor walked us through what we could expect and reminded us of all the various environments and situations in which people have babies, in deserts and jungles, on mountains, and yes, living out of a tent. We quickly realized that we had finally gotten our footing and established a solid process for our research. We were about to take on the whole new challenge of organizing doctor's appointments in different states every 4 weeks, buying and eating healthy food with limited options for groceries and zero access to refrigeration, and not sharing the biggest news of our life with anyone. This was a challenge that was well worth it, and so our search for stories was still on.